Hello again, and welcome to The Way of the Cross, a Passion Pilgrimage Through Song. My name is JJ Wright, and I'm the director of the Notre Dame Folk Choir. And I'm joined today by some of my closest collaborators and students in the folk choir. We're thrilled to spend the next several weeks discussing the Passion with you, and of course, the next hour today discussing the Passion. Today's episode is called Storytelling Through Song. And in this episode, we're going to look at why we've chosen to be present with the Passion through music in particular. The Passion is about being with, beholding, and not looking away. When we sing the Passion, we worship. We mourn the crucified Jesus with Mary and his disciples. We listen intently and perform Jesus' words in the Passion. We learn about our own failures in the shadow of the cross. When we perform, we offer thanksgiving for the sacrifice which bonds and nourishes us in a beloved community. The Passion also offers us a framework for encountering ugliness and teaches us how to respond with compassion, empathy, kindness, forgiveness, and humility. But encountering ugliness takes work, and this is where our music comes in, because music allows us to unite our pursuit of the Passion together as thinkers, poets, composers, theologians, performers, really as the whole church. As artists and musicians in particular, we practice over and over and form our bodies in a particular way, form our voices in a particular way to be able to perform freely. In the Passion, the joy of this kind of pure performance, though, is completely commingled, is completely wrapped together with the sorrow of the crucifixion. And through this experience, we learn about our vocation as Christians. We witness the Passion, we sing through it, and we're active participants in its reenactment. The Passion enables us to contemplate the difficult questions that we're longing to ask and talk about, and it enables us to sing through them and into them and share the load in community. Through our continued conversations in this course and through the Passion, we're grateful that you continue sharing the load with us. So thank you for being here today. I'd like to thank our co-sponsors, the Mendoza College of Business, the Department of Theology, Campus Ministry, and of course the Notre Dame Alumni Association and ThinkND for hosting this show. We'd also be so grateful to hear your questions during the program today. A form will get shared at various points throughout the show. You can feel free to enter those at any time. We'll be monitoring the sheet. And if it fits right into the conversation, we'd be glad to answer the question right there, but we'll definitely have about 10 or 15 minutes at the end, in particular dedicated to your questions. So now I'd like to introduce our guests. I'm joined today by a good friend and longtime collaborator named Ike Sturm. Ike was raised in a musical home in Wisconsin and learned from his father, who was a renowned composer and arranger named Fred Sturm. Ike has played with many people, and but in particular has had the privilege of performing with Gene Bertoncini, Theo Blackman, Ingrid Jensen, Donnie McCaslin, Bobby McFerrin, Ben Monder, Maria Schneider, and Kenny Wheeler. So thank you for being here, Ike. I'm so thrilled to get the chance to talk to you today. Ike is one of the composers also who contributed to the Passion and plays bass in the production. We're joined also by Meg Buter, who is a sophomore in the folk choir. In addition to being a wonderful soprano, Meg is our social media and communications coordinator in the choir. And she majors in American Studies and English and has a minor in education, schooling, and society. And of course, we're joined by Kim Belcher, again, professor in the Department of Theology, and just a wonderful collaborator in this process so far. If you want to find out any more about any of our guests today, you can visit the ThinkND site and read their full bios there. But I wanted to start with a question for Ike, but maybe you could tell us a little bit about your background, but also tell us, like, how'd you get involved with this project and how'd you get here today?
Well, way back, I guess maybe 10 years or so, JJ gave me a call out of the blue. I was working at St. Peter's in New York as the jazz director and music director at the church there. And JJ reached out. I had written a jazz mass, and the very first phone call we talked for about 2 hours. So it was kind of it's been downhill ever since then. But JJ is a dear friend of mine, and has opened up so many things to me on so many levels. But I think one of the most exciting things is what we're experiencing right now with this passion and with the collaborative energy and spirits that are informing everything we do. I think this whole thing has been sort of a creative, connective web, meeting everyone at Notre Dame and putting our energy together into this gigantic project. And there's so much heart going into it. It's really been inspiring to be a part of it. And on a personal level, to be able to compose music that's so personal and so deep. There's the messages that go into this music don't get any deeper than this. And so to be able to put yourself fully into it and also be able to share that with a community has been really powerful. And this project began with JJ on my part, thinking that this would be JJ writing a passion. And we spoke about that, and I kind of challenged him to dig into that on his own. And I soon realized that he had a much bigger vision for this that's much more collaborative and involved many, many people. And so it's been my joy to be part of that and see that grow.
Yeah, thanks so much, Ike. It's just great to have you here today, and it's been so incredible to have you as part of the project. I want to turn to Meg and just ask a little bit about, this is our first chance to introduce you to this audience, of course, but you're a sophomore and you joined the choir last year, of course, in the height of COVID. And I'm sure you expected to join the choir and to sing in a choir, but somehow you got tied into this passion project. Can you tell us a little bit about what that's been like and kind of your journey to now in the choir?
Yeah, so definitely joined a choir hoping to sing, and we still managed to sing some last year. But I think one of the cool things that came out of the COVID era last year was this committees system that the leaders of the choir set up at the time, where at the beginning of the year, members were able to just rank oh, maybe I want to be on the spiritual committee, or maybe I want to be on the poetry writing committee. And I ranked that one just kind of on a whim because I was like, oh, I like poetry, I like writing. Didn't really know that it had anything to do with the passion. So I got placed in that team of 9 or 10 students who I was still getting to know as a new member of the choir. And then just kind of found myself thrown into the passion project, and we kind of functioned as Tristan, who has been on previous episodes, was leading our committee through Zoom meetings from Vermont. So it was kind of thrown together, and we were just brainstorming where the writing process could go for this and how we as college students could somehow contribute to this professional project, but that had to do so much with we realized, and I realized too, my personal life. So it kind of it made the choir more of a faith community for me. So then even further on in that line, after joining the committee, we all kind of took a scene that we wanted to have in the passion, which are now actually in the performance, and said you know what, I think I want to focus on this one. And I just kind of picked the crucifixion because I had limited religious education in my life prior to coming to Notre Dame. And so I was like, this one seems like the most obvious. So I picked it, and then I obviously realized I had picked a heavy one that required me to ask a lot of big questions of myself and of my own faith. So yeah, I think I grew closer to people in the choir through that process. I think I discovered more about myself as a creative person, someone who loves to dig into the creative process and how I could do that with others. I think it was cool. I think I learned how to be more vulnerable. And also to admit when I didn't know things, or just when things I was unsure exactly what direction we wanted the scene to take, And I had to kind of let go of some of my student like tendencies to want to plan and like curate everything into a formula. So yeah, and then it just kind of took off from there, and we all dug into our different scenes and came back together and introduced them to the choir. So it was pretty awesome.
That's so great, Meg. I love hearing you talk about your experience, and Meg is so humble too, and that's one of the best qualities that she has, because she wrote some absolutely incredible texts and melodies that are all part of what are still in the current performance. And we have another question I want to ask him next, but I do want to play this little chunk here, even though I'm going off script, because last year, Meg, like she said, described what her experience was. And one day she just sent me and Tristan this email with these beautiful melodies. And she's just like, I was just sitting in a chair and I thought of these and I wanted to share them with you. And so, but I wanted to kind of just put some flesh to what Meg was describing. So here's the melody that she sent.
Behold, where is your love's light? Your eyes are doves departing, torn open by its wings, but it shall not sever.
So we have that beautiful melody. Behold, where is your love's light? Your eyes are doves departing, torn open by its wings, but it shall not sever. And what scripture is that from, Meg? Do you remember off the top of your head?
I don't remember. It's kind of a conglomeration of a couple.
But it's incredible because that's comes though at the beginning of the crucifixion and really sets the stage. So I just wanted to show you, as Meg knows, like when you're involved in it, or as all of our guests know, when you're involved in a creative process, the things that you contribute, you never quite know how they're going to end up presenting themselves. But this is one of those occasions where the exact thing that Meg created found itself into this final version of the crucifixion. So really, really great example there. But we keep using this word creativity, and it's really key to the type of work we've been doing. But Kim, I wondered if you might be able to talk about why creativity is so important in a faith community.
Yeah, thanks, JJ. Yeah, I want to talk about that. And especially like a lot of times as Christians, we expect that our role as kind of inheriting our tradition is that there's going to be like a nice, neat package of answers, and that package is kind of going to be just handed to us. And our job is to sort of keep it up in the air, like, a balloon. But tradition is actually not like that. When we talk about tradition, where there's something that we're receiving, but also something that we're shaping. Otherwise, it wouldn't be tradition. It would just be sort of a time, like a time capsule. And so when we talk about that in the context of the lectionary, for example, and in the context of our Lenten practices, that might be a context in which it really makes sense to us. So like to start with Lent, like every year, the church says to us, here's Lent. Lent is a time, we have a structure. We have certain readings from the Bible that we listen to. We have certain traditional practices of fasting. We have these like very general categories of like fasting, almsgiving, and prayer. That's what Lent is. But in order to actually practice Lent, I have to take that up and I have to choose, and I have to adapt and interpret what that's going to mean. And I think one of the things that's really exciting in the Passion Project is that we, instead of treating the apostles and the disciples of Jesus like there's somebody that's very different from us, somebody that has all the answers and already knows how everything's going to go, we actually allow ourselves to recognize the way that they too were receiving something and then creatively trying to understand what it meant. And so that's something that I think is really important here. So, like, for example, in the Passion, and Meg, you were just talking about this experience of having had all of these different scriptures, and then finding the meaning of those scriptures in Christ's Passion. And that's something that the writers of the Gospels had to do also for the first time. They had these scriptures, like, for example, the reading that we read on Good Friday, that says it was our infirmities that he bore, our sufferings that he endured. That was written during the Babylonian exile, about the sufferings of Israel. But when the disciples of Jesus thought about the Passion, they realized that he showed them a new meaning in that passage. And so that's why we read that on Good Friday. So that's a creative act.
Yeah, very cool. And one of the things that has kept coming up throughout this process has been this desire to kind of meet each other in the moment. And a lot of the times in music, we do that through improvisation. And both my and Ike's backgrounds are as jazz musicians. And of course, when you play jazz, the bread and butter of what you do is improvising together. Ike, I wondered if you could talk a little bit. I love putting Ike on the spot. So every time he comes out to Notre Dame, I won't tell him when or where, but we'll be in the middle of a rehearsal and I'll just say, Ike, could you take the next 30 minutes for us and just kind of do something? And every single time, Ike somehow comes up with just this, like, a magical activity for us to find ourselves and find each other and really find kind of our faith together through improvisation. So I wondered if you could talk about that, Ike.
Yeah, thank you, JJ. I can always trust you to put me on the spot. But it's a joyful thing. I think for me, I've started to recognize it as a bit of a spiritual practice, and sort of bringing together and integrating different parts of myself and things that I love, which are playing sacred music and writing sacred music and playing jazz and playing improvisatory music. And there are a lot of common threads, and I start to notice, I've talked to a lot of people about why playing jazz in church may or may not be a good idea, and all those types of conversations. And I think what's come up for the choir, which has been so beautiful, is this very vulnerable kind of meditative process of just being still and being quiet. We had this moment when we were in Buffalo a few weeks ago that's really close to my mind right now. And actually, I was inspired by some of the prayer moments that we've had as a choir, where we've had a really busy weekend of playing and rehearsing. And then we get together and have this gorgeous contemplative, connective time together, praying and singing. And I have goosebumps right now thinking about it, because the choir really inspired me and brought me into their community in those moments. And so I challenged them when we were in Buffalo. We were in the midst of all of the turmoil in Europe that's happening, was really coming to our attention at that time. And we kind of had this collective moment where there was so much on our minds. We were gathering to play this performance that we've worked so hard to get together. And we just found this space where we were quiet and we listened to each other. We didn't know what key we were going to play in. We didn't know what motives we were going to sing. We didn't know what text we were going to sing. It's much like offering an improvised prayer just in the moment from your heart. And that's really what it turned into. We had a couple of brave souls that just started singing, maybe speaking at first, saying, here's what I'm noticing in the moment. Here's how I'm feeling right now. And then their neighbor said, I'm going to do the same thing, but I'm going to sing a little motive. And I think it puts us on edge. It's a challenging space to be, but I think what ends up happening is this really rewarding place of kind of offering ourselves and our deepest desires or noticings, And it was beautiful for me to see that come together. And personally, it's actually quite a vulnerable place as a teacher or as a guest or facilitator to be in as well. And so JJ's joking about putting me on the spot, but I think there's actually something legitimate about that requires me to be in that kind of space where I'm not quite sure what's going to happen, really listening to those around me. And so by risking a great amount, we receive a great kind of experience on a spiritual level. And so I felt really connected and brought together in that space. And it looks different every time we do it, but it really gives us a way to come together in a really unique and profound way.
Yeah, it's very cool because it resonates very closely with a lot of what Meg was talking about earlier with some of these sessions that we've gone into with the scripture, which is just like, I don't know what this is going to say to me in this moment necessarily. And I might not have even read this scripture before. Maybe I'm even embarrassed to say that I haven't read it yet. But if I can be present with it and sit with it, and there's this actual space and time to be with it, somehow, like there's meaning to be found with that. There's community, there's Eucharist, really, I think, to be found in that process. So, but one of the things that Ike, he talked about vulnerability, Ike, and you've written some really difficult stuff in the Passion. Ike was responsible for composing most of the Peter scene and then most of the Pilate scene, really all of it. And so, I wondered, Ike, if you could talk about, like, firstly, what is the process like of creating kind of the musical materials associated with these stories that we know so well, and then kind of like what does it have to do with you, or what does it have to do with Lent even, and maybe for us as we kind of look into these scenes for insight into our own lives?
Yeah, I think this has made me think about a lot of different things. I think I'd like to start by saying that kind of a launching point for me was actually much like our process that we just described, was listening and hearing from some of the folks in the choir. It's been inspiring to see different people contributing. And I've had this opportunity to work with several students and a small group of students ongoing where we have these types of conversations, and we're working on composing. And out of that, one of our students, Naima, actually wrote a beautiful, much like Meg's beautiful theme that we just heard. Naima had written a beautiful piece and had the section that is around "This Is My Body," which is a really touching, obviously text, but also musical moment in the piece. And I really sat with what Naima had written and worked with some different chords and kind of worked it into the context of the other things that we had written. And I think it's a difficult thing to describe, but it's a beautiful example of the things that we're talking about, where it's very nuanced. It's a way of listening and evolving and bringing a lot of different voices into the picture. And so that was a starting point for me. And I think your larger question, JJ, I feel like is still playing out for me on a personal and spiritual level. I think what happens to me is I dig into these texts very deeply in the moment when I'm looking at them, and I let them inform, I let the text and the spirit of the text inform where the music and where the phrases are going to go. And it's a really, I love that process more than just about anything. And so I'm still in the middle of it, and I'm really excited to be part of it. So yeah, awesome. Yeah, I wondered, one of the great things that Ike kind of offered to the piece writ large was this really awesome engagement with rhythm. And I'm going to play here just a chunk from the Pilate scene, which is, we're entering into the second act, and Claudia, Pilate's wife, has just made this impassioned plea to let Jesus go, and the kind of crowd and the chief priests and everyone is kind of freaking out, for lack of a better word, just to kind of to move the story along. So this is Ike's chorus here on this section in the Pilate scene.
Don't you see? It's all over. Your own nation has given you up. your kingdom of God, all your preaching, it's finished. A wandering monarch, your reign is diminished.
Yes, thanks, Ike, for that beautiful music.
Welcome.
Yeah. So, Kim, I have this kind of wild question with a lot of big words in it that I want to ask you, but I know that you'll help us understand. But we played earlier Meg's melody, and I alluded to it earlier, but this idea of beholding. And when we were kind of conceiving of the crucifixion, we liked to separate the be from the hold a lot and kind of play with what that word might mean. But this idea of collaborative creativity, how does it embody Jesus's directive from the cross to behold? And how, in heeding that commandment, might we retrieve access to our fundamental identities as children of God?
Yeah, thanks, JJ. I wasn't really present for a lot of the breaking down of that word behold, but what I see when I watch the Passion, when I listen to the Passion, is and especially when I reflect on how the Passion has come to be, I see people bringing together these like individual acts of creativity that Meg and Ike have been talking about into a bigger process of what I would think of as like becoming a church. And I think that's actually part of what I think is, and that's like, to me, without having been there for the pieces where you broke down this word, like to me, when I think about Jesus's behold your son, behold your mother, I think about that as a moment when the church is coming to be, when Christ is giving over his identity as son of the Father and son of Mary, and he's sharing it with all of us. And so that to me is like really what's happening in that moment. And the thing that I think is really important about communally singing together, which is something that obviously, like in the Passion at a paramount level, we're doing this where we're bringing together improvisation and individual theological reflection and communal theological reflection. But what's important about singing is that when we sing, we're always joining our voices together creatively to make new meaning, and to embody being one together with everyone else who's singing with us. And I think that's like something that we can learn about our regular Eucharistic worship by reflecting on the Passion. There's so much Eucharistic meaning in the Passion, which we'll be talking more about in the coming weeks. But I think when I actually heard the Passion for the first time, it reminded me of this like powerful word about the Eucharist and its meaning from Ignatius of Antioch, who is a 2nd century theologian, so very, very early theologian, who was writing about the way that the Eucharist and our experiences of suffering allow us to be Christ together. And so let me read you this quote. He says, "Grant me nothing more than to be poured out as a libation for God while an altar is still ready." So he's reflecting at this point, Ignatius has been arrested, and he's reflecting on the fact that he's going to be martyred. He's going to be killed for Jesus. But then he reflects on what his martyrdom means for this community that he's leaving behind. And he says that becoming a chorus in love, you may sing to the Father in Jesus Christ, because God judged the bishop of Syria, that's him, worthy to be found at the setting, having been sent from the sun's rising. So he is reflecting on the way that his suffering has meaning because it's pulling together. And he uses melody and singing together in a lot of his reflections on the Eucharist. That's something that I think as Catholics we don't remember as much sometimes as we ought to, that singing together actually has been associated with the Eucharist since the church's very early foundations.
Yeah, I'd like to jump in and respond to that, those thoughts too, especially as a member of the choir. And this is the first like spiritual choir I've ever sung in, but have been in choirs for a long time. And what you were talking about, Kim, reminded me a lot of what we do at the end of every rehearsal, and actually what Ike was referring to too, when he was talking about the moments when we pause and just pray together as a choir, and we sing. We have 2 different songs that we sing every week, and we all hold each other's hands, and that I think was kind of where some of the idea of behold and community, at least the sentiment, I don't know if I was aware of it when I was working on it with Tristan, but like that's where some of that came from, where a lot of the moments where I was able to pause, and something about singing like slows things down in prayer. And even we see like in the performance when we sing the behold verse, it's very slow. And I remember JJ saying like, we got to draw this out even more, like really make the audience like wait for it, and I think that helps us as the singers too, to really pause with it and pause with each other and with the suffering that we all bring to that prayer. I feel like at the end of rehearsal, when we do that, if whatever I'm struggling with, like presents itself, but meanwhile, I am holding the hands of my friends. So I think that's, like you were saying, Kim, with the behold your mother, behold your son, which is a later part of the crucifixion scene too in our performance, is basically Christ saying, like, you gotta hold on to each other. You've got to come and be, like when we broke it down, we said be, period, hold, period. Like come and be as you are, and then hold each other in that. And so joining in community, just as who I am, and then also as a creative collaborator in this project, which I think a vast majority, if not all of the choir at this point feels that way, that they have somehow contributed, and now we've all been able to perform it together. So yeah, I think that helped. I think that helps now when we perform it and how we're able to be authentic with each other. And then even throughout the writing process, how I and other classmates, we just continued to add more people. Like another student in the choir, Hannah, came in and joined the crucifixion team. And it was just such a authentic and just judgment-free zone. We would just come in and offer up what we had to say that day. And if it wasn't perfect, or, like we didn't ever use it, I was going through our old brainstorming doc, and it's like, okay, half these things did not get used, and like, that's the way it is. Half these things that I wrote and like poured energy into all those days did not quote unquote get used, but they helped in the process. So yeah, I think that I spent a lot longer than I thought I would thinking about one word, behold, but I think it was worth it.
Well, it shows too, and I think that's why the example I played earlier is so remarkable, because it just when you created it and it was presented, it was fully formed idea in itself. And like I said, anyone who's been engaged with any type of writing or creativity or anything like that knows how many revisions things go through. But when you get to find an idea that that is very kind of unsoiled like that, it's an incredible privilege. And I just want to emphasize too how much I appreciated Meg's willingness to just be present with the difficulty of the words that we were dealing with too. She jumped into the crucifixion and then is willing to sit there with words like, "Behold, where is your love's light?" Mourning Jesus on the cross. And it's just an incredible gift for all of us, I think, not just in our careers, but really for all of us in the whole church, that we have people that are willing to think like this and willing to kind of use their time like this. I just wanted to put a quick plug also towards submitting your questions. We'd love to answer any questions you might have. The link was just shared in the chat if you'd like access to the form to submit a question. But I wondered if we could talk a little bit more about music, maybe just from the perspective of our episode again, storytelling through song. Like, why use songs? Why use music? Kim has given us some really great things to think about from Antioch. But for anyone who would like to kind of take a shot at it, like it's so interesting to me, at least from the musician's perspective, especially in a forum like this where we're trying to figure out how to talk about what we do for people who don't do what we do. And one of the tough things about music is that kind of on the back end, so in the creation area of it, what we do to create it ends up being very similar, I think, to how we hope that it could be experienced or perceived by an audience person. And so I'm wondering if we could maybe unlock a little bit more about the nuts and bolts of how we create these things, maybe as just a lens into what we could ask from an audience person in being in this music with us.
Yeah, JJ, I was thinking about what Meg was talking about this idea of that you write so much material that doesn't get used. And I think that's an interesting thing to most people probably get that in the general, populace. People understand the creative process to that degree. But I think it's a cool thing to note that we live in a society that kind of values like production or something tangible. And much of the spirit and actually content and work hours and thought that went into this sort of went into the ether. It sort of like escaped its way out of what we see as the passion that exists right now. And I think you can look at that a couple of ways. I think in some ways that maybe could feel like wasteful, like something escapes, but I actually feel the exact opposite in that when Meg, when you were speaking, I felt like it reminded me of prayer, of the idea that this practice of like ongoing, you're just going through this practice every day, and I don't know, there's something that relates or resonates with that for me, that the process, it's sort of like the journey, not the destination kind of thing, where we really, by putting all of this heart and effort day by day and year by year in this case, you arrive at this place that just continues beyond that, and it's just sort of a stop along the way. But that all of that work that goes into it, for me as a composer, I'm constantly writing new material that may or may not see the light of day, but it all does in a way, because it's all connected. And much in the same way that all of the voices in the choir were part of this, because without this exact group of people, it would not have been possible. Like all their voices were definitely part of this, in some ways more concretely than others, but absolutely it wouldn't exist without every single person in that group. And so I feel the same way about the musical material, that unless you make a mistake or you revise this or you let go of this, then you don't arrive at the stop where we are right now on this passion. So I think that's Meg, you kind of gave me some insight into that, so thank you.
Ike, I love what you've said there about the way that like creativity and improvisation and prayer are all things that kind of require us to put the cult of productivity on hold and say, stop that for a while.
Yeah, it's difficult to do. We just we got two questions in while Ike was talking, and the first is, will there be a live performance of the Passion on campus for the public to attend? And the answer is yes. On April 10th, which is Palm Sunday, a week from this Sunday, we'll perform the Passion in the Basilica of the Sacred Heart on campus at 8 p.m. And that will be kind of like our last performance of this year of the Passion before we go to Jerusalem to record in May. But we hope that anyone who watches who's in the South Bend area will feel free to attend. But we got another question too that's directly related, but how hard is it to let go of the material you create that you don't use? How do you know what is good and what needs to be edited? And are you just thinking about what fits? So it's such a great question.
Wow, yeah, beautiful.
I maybe I could start just for a second here, because I felt like the kind of short story of this piece was that we quote unquote wrote the whole thing first, kind of 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, and then there was not any opportunity or venue for that version to be used. And so I thought a lot about this exact question: how hard is it to let go of the material? Because I was figuring out how to let it go. I thought maybe it was just kind of done in vain, and the effort would be used some other time. As like musicians, like you're kind of always socking your ideas away for later, because there's always an opportunity to reuse things. But that didn't make it any less painful to let the material go. And the incredible thing about letting go of the material that I created was that so much better stuff got made than the stuff that I made at that time. And at the time, it does not yet feel like a privilege to be present for kind of what the follow-up ended up being. But from my own experience, I kind of had an instinct or a hope that if I were to let go, this other thing could open up. And man, wow, it really did, because it just opened the door for all of this incredible stuff to be created that wouldn't have otherwise happened. And so it was worth it. It was worth it to let go of the stuff. But I just quick follow up. You don't need tickets to the concert on April 10th. You just show up at 8:00 in the Basilica, and there it'll be. But I wondered, a couple people unmuted, so if you have anything to respond to that question, feel free to go for it.
Yeah, I could speak a little bit to it. I think one thing, I mean, I have very little experience in this process of letting go compared to like Ike and JJ, for example, in terms of your art. But as we were working on the crucifixion scene, and it became this like 20-page Google Doc of material, and it started out in such a different place than it is now when we entered it. And I kept saying to Tristan, like, I feel like there needs to be more light and hope in this, because I think that was the easiest thing I thought for us to write about would be, oh, if we just like sprinkle in a little hope, like it might be a new take for people on the crucifixion, and also just like a little bit easier for me to grapple with emotionally. And I think I had to learn how to let go of that and dig into the harder part of it, and just say like, okay, this is suffering, and like the people there were not feeling hope. So like putting ourselves in the position of the people who witnessed the crucifixion, and then Jesus as well. We tried to. It was kind of daunting, but we were like, okay, this is a conversation between Jesus on the cross and everyone who's watching. So trying to like dig into how he might have felt. And so throughout that, we just kept saying, oh, okay, what fits, what doesn't of these words that we've come up with. And so trying to figure that out, and then looking at it in the context of the broader performance, and kind of realizing like, okay, there is hope woven through this whole thing already, in the fact that we are doing it together, and in where it starts, which is, okay, we're sunk into Holy Saturday right now in the upper room, but let's tell this story together. And so I think that helped me kind of put it into context and say, like, just in general, the place that I might have started with this piece of art will probably end up in a totally different place than I had quote unquote planned, and that's okay.
Yeah, thank you, Meg. Yeah, I think that you mentioned that we all have different experiences with letting go, but I think we all bring that to the table as humans. It's like an ongoing thing we all have to have to work on and be mindful of. But I was thinking, I had this memory. I mentioned this jazz mass that brought JJ and I together back many years ago, and I had this. I was remembering kind of what inspired that, and I was playing with my daughter who is, I think, about 2 years old at the time, and we had this tune that we were just playing, and some really early hour in the morning and playing around, and this little phrase, I was just playing my bass and having fun, and we were singing and playing together, and this little motive came out, and it was a bass line, and I got excited about it, and the tune was called Play, and it ended up turning into, when I sat down to write the Gloria, I realized this was the spirit of it. This was the inspiration for it. And so I got all excited, and I thought this will be the Gloria. And I dug into it, and I kept waiting. The bass line wasn't quite fitting in. The whole idea of the tune, I kept trying to fit it in, and it just never made sense. And I got all the way through this 10-minute, piece, and I just thought, it's not there. What I thought was the essence of this song is not there. I had to let it go. And it was kind of a dramatic thing for me, just because I was so excited about it, and I worked so hard to force it, and finally just realized this is not it. Like, I have to just take a step back. And so I think I'm reminding myself this is a good thing to remember, and as we go ahead, just things are not always what we make them out to be or what we think they're going to be, and there's a more marvelous plan in place. So yeah.
I want to follow up on Meg and Ike on your on your reflections on how this works, and in terms of like how we enter into that letting go. One of the things that I think is theologically really powerful about the Passion is that it it's not how we would expect God to be. Like, when we think about who God is, we don't think of our first thought is not a bleeding man dying on a cross, after having been condemned to death. But we actually sometimes we have to let go of what we thought God was going to be in order to find God with us in those moments of suffering. And that's one of the really profound messages of the Passion, is that God doesn't stand apart from suffering, but enters into it.
Yeah, that's incredible, Kim. It reminds me of our Zoom a couple weeks ago, where I don't want the Passion to be real, right? And the way I got there was kind of by acknowledging that, like, I don't want the clergy sexual abuse crisis to be real. I would rather live in a world where that is not the reality. And when I was kind of looking at that next to the Passion, what else can you do except let go of that idea when you look at the Passion? Because we look around, at least I look around at my life, and I see so many things that have that same marker. It's not perfect. It's broken. It's suffering. It's betraying. What other invitation could there be than to the best thing I could think of maybe was just to behold it, to be with it, to sit with it, to be present to it. And I think we've gotten to see at least a little bit what the fruits of that are. It's due to no real effort on our own behalf, but this willingness, I think, to enter into the process in community. We were talking about the road to Emmaus this morning. I was talking to Tristan about that, and there's this incredible quote from Raymond Brown, who was a great scripture scholar, and he's talking about the road to Emmaus and how these people, Jesus just shows up right next to him as they're walking, and they don't recognize him. And even as he's kind of describing all of the reasons why he is the Messiah, the unrecognized Messiah, they're still just completely oblivious to this idea. They're so caught up in the reality of what just happened. He's just been killed. How do you even not know that this has happened? And I loved the idea that, their hearts were burning inside of them. So by making themselves present to the scripture, by making themselves present to the breaking of the bread, somehow they get to know God. And it's just an incredible example for us, I think.
I love that. And I was actually teaching the story of the walk to Emmaus to my 5th and 6th grade Sunday school CCD class this Sunday. And for the first time, I noticed that the disciples actually don't just tell Jesus about the crucifixion. They actually tell him that people have been to the tomb and it's empty, and that people have been telling them that he's resurrected. They have everything they need to know, but they're still not convinced. And I think, that's actually what creativity does, is it takes us from like having all the pieces we need to actually like being part of the story ourselves.
Wow. Yeah, thanks, Kim. We'd love to hear any of your questions. Please feel free to submit. There's a form in the chat there. Most recently, go ahead, Ike.
Oh, I was just laughing. Kim, I'm going to need to think about that for a little while. It's really beautiful. Yeah, it's just what an invitation when we, the natural world around us and creation gives us so many examples of that too. It's just that I felt that yesterday. I saw this. I live near the Hudson River in New York, and it's. I saw the water, and I just thought I felt completely renewed. It was such an abstract moment, and really no way for me to describe it, but I felt so connected to the divine and creation, and boy, it's very bizarre, but it's just there's a real invitation, and so many different, whatever touches us, it might be music or art or some kind of craft or some other part of our life that really speaks to you for whatever reason, but what a beautiful way that we kind of gives us healing and connection. It's beautiful.
Yeah. I wondered if we could talk about a little bit about just how can something like the Passion, how can collaborative work, collaborative prayer, collaborative creativity give us the opportunity to heal social pain and division, or allow us to be part of that process. It's a very bold promise to make, and so I'm choosing my words carefully. But I think that, at least from my perspective, what I've gotten to see is that we can tip the scale a little bit with this type of work towards healing pain and division. So I wondered if any of us might be interested in talking about that.
Maybe kind of on the, sorry, Ike.
No, go ahead, Meg.
Well, on a smaller scale, with like individual pain that kind of becomes shared through experiencing this performance. I think when we performed it over spring break, it was really the first time when it was like anyone was there, like we were in a place new to us, and people were coming who we had never met. Who knows why they decided to come, and in a church, which we performed all of them in a church over spring break, it's different than a theater where you can't really see the audience. But this time it was like I was looking in the eyes of people I was singing to, who I didn't know, or who I had just met, and they were crying, or like in the Palm Sunday scene that's really joyful, they were smiling, or like happy tears, all of the above. And so I think like seeing how it touches people who haven't even encountered it before was really cool, and how much I loved getting to interact with audience members after the performance as well. Just talking about how what we were doing really impacted them. I don't know what that means for like division and coming together. I'd have to think more about that. But on an individual level, just like how art can touch us is pretty incredible.
Yeah, Meg, I was going to say actually the same exact thing that you finished with, which was that I think it's all on an individual level and a collective level, like by treating these kind of individual situations and healing ourselves, it just spreads. We just encourage others to do that too. And I feel really blessed. I work for a group called Connect.Faith that's an online ministry, and we do this thing called Creativity Lab, which is essentially exactly what JJ just asked about. We just get together. It's kind of similar spirit to what we're doing here today, but people come together on Zoom, and different artists and creative people share how they're creative, why they're creative, and the context for it is a Christian one, but it's sort of this branch that reaches out to say, like, well, what is why are we creative beings, and how can we be healed through these different processes? And so I love being in this work. I feel so lucky to be part of that in all of these different things that we're doing. But I'm noticing in that question how much I care about that, and how much I believe that there is healing to be done, not only just for myself, but I see that in the lives of those around me as well.
Thanks, Ike. We just had a question come in, which, since I didn't create the passion, I'm going to read for our other panelists to answer. It says, how has creating the passion fundamentally changed you? What are you most proud of creatively, spiritually, personally, giving your heart out to others in your growth? And that's from Northbrook, Illinois.
I'm off the cuff, obviously, but I guess I want to say it's a little edgy, but I'm proud of like my disappointment in a way, because my disappointment has always been with me, and I think through the passion I've found a way to see that and understand where it belongs.
I think I was thinking of it on a little more concrete level for myself. That resonates with me too, JJ. But I think for me, I had a really powerful experience working with the Peter text. Tristan wrote this really beautiful text for what we consider to be the Peter song, and it's a very inspiring text, and I found the music to just flow out of that so naturally. And I think that the painful pieces of that you can really feel within yourself, and you can feel that those questions and that pain and the tug that happens when you're hearing that text, and you're really kind of living that when you're singing it or playing it or writing it. And so that was really powerful. And like I said before, I feel like it's really an ongoing thing. I feel like we're still in it, and I'm still in the midst of it. So I don't know yet how to process it. It feels very immersive. So I'm grateful for that.
Yeah, I can build off that too. I think the pride that I feel comes like for the whole choir and me, thinking about our both musicianship and just like courage to perform this over and over again. It's not an easy thing to perform or to make. And so the process of creating it and performing it and practicing it over and over again, and thinking about, like, I remember one of the rehearsals that has stuck with me was when we were rehearsing the Peter scene, and we were playing with the rhythms, and we were all kind of like adjusting to each other and trying to figure out how it sounded most natural, and kind of saying, okay, this is how it's written, but how do we feel that it's right? And so just like throwing some of those conventions away, and having the courage to be able to look at this as not only art, but our art, I think was really cool.
Yeah, well, Meg, Ike, and Kim, thank you so much for joining today for our episode. It's always wonderful to talk to each of you, and just a great privilege to be with the four of us together here too. Thanks to our audience for being here. We're grateful to you for being with us over the past couple weeks. We'll be back 2 weeks from today on April 12th, I think it is, at 12:30 Eastern time on the live Zoom. All of our episodes are on the Folk Choir YouTube channel. They're also available on all podcast streaming platforms. And we're happy to say this week too, we have some additional material on the ThinkND website. So feel free to go check out some of the kind of behind the scenes material that's available, some different versions of some of the music from over the past couple years. But of course, we're always thrilled to hear from you. And we're thrilled if you spread the word with anyone that you might know who'd be interested in learning more about the Passion. Don't forget, April 10th, we will be back with a performance of the Passion for any of you who are in the South Bend area. We'd love for you to join us at the Basilica of the Sacred Heart. And we'll look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks again.